kind of also felt, and it might have just been an excuse as well, so that I can not prepare, that I can just come here and speak from my heart, whatever comes out. Which means that I'm going to be tripping up for the next 10, 15 minutes. So what I would appreciate also is if any of you all think of anything at all, just give a shout or raise your hand so we can make this a conversation, because there's a lot of voices over here with lots of unique experiences and insight into everything that we care about. So I think we should have kind of a collaborative experience. And so much about farming is collaborative. If you're looking at hunter-gatherer societies, you know, all you need is one person with a spear, and when you're all set. But with the advent of farming, you know, 16,000 or 12,000 years ago, then you're actually talking about the building of communities. Today, you know, when I think about farming, I think about you know, obviously all the issues that we're facing today in modern society, really big problems such as diabetes, such as obesity. You know, I was on the plane just a couple days ago, and there's a lady, and she was just leaning against the window. She was a young lady. She was like maybe 50 years old. And I'm going to stand over here so my mom doesn't get sun on her face.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand just like that.
Right.
All right. So
We're not tall enough.
You can see the door. Close the
thank you.
and just pull the lever at the top.
And
Got it.
thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, I asked, just wanted to make sure she was all right, and she told me that she was on the way to get alternative treatment somewhere in Texas. I was stopping over in Dallas. That she had spinal cancer, that her 15-year-old daughter had just passed away from cancer, that her husband had cancer, had passed away from cancer, that her sister had cancer, and her mother had passed away from cancer at the same time too, which made me think of my mom, who, by the way, was ill for a while and has recently bounced back. So I think about all the blessings that we have in our life as well. But my mother, you know, the other day was telling me about her 102-year-old aunt, and how when she hit the century mark, she was very healthy and busy at the same time. Back in those days, my mom grew up in the seaside of southern Japan, in a community of people where every person, every family had their own little garden. And what my mother loved to do more than anything was be out in the garden from morning all day long. And she loved the feeling of soil, you know, is what she said to me. And where was I going with that? I stopped taking Ritalin a while.
Don't worry, humor is always part of the best part.
I would give my mom a heart attack over here. So, yeah. So back to the, often I used to be a director of nutrition for this wonderful non-for-profit in New Haven called New Haven Farms, where we work with low-income pre-diabetics. And, a while ago, I was speaking at a really great guy, a music producer's house. His name's L.A. Reid, and it was about nutrition. And you know, my mom is a nutritionist, and I asked her, you know, what should I talk about? You know, because I'm also talking, I'm on the panel with two people who are experts in nutrition, and I don't want to be redundant. She's like, don't talk about nutrition. And she was like, you know what? Let me tell you about my 2-year-old aunt, and the lifestyle that we had, you know, and the lifestyle that I used to have, and that when I was a little girl, you know, I'd play in the gardens, and I would get really brown, and my mom would say, oh, her mom would say, oh, look at your hands, they're so dirty. And back in the day, my mom was like, this is really awful, what she used to say, but it was just that way. Nobody's going to marry a girl with hands that are dirty. she said she'd ignore her mom and just stay outside and keep on digging. And so my mom had this tremendous passion for gardening, which she still has today. My father is the same way, but man, my mom has all these wonderful stories. And about the 102-year-old aunt, in the house that they lived, they also created a little room for her as well. So she lived in a house in her own little room with all these grandchildren running and great-grandchildren running in and out, and it was just incredibly full of life. And people did take their time to spend time in the garden, and no one actually sprayed anything, pesticides on the plants that they had. And she went out and literally collected snails and shellfish and brought them home, or the fish that they ate were also caught by fishermen that were fishing right in front of the house as well. Well, these are things that most of us can't do today because of pollution and all these other chemical issues that we have to think about, which leads back to what we were talking about, which is, you know, the cancer, the diabetes, the heart disease, all these epidemics of disease we're dealing with today, which, by the way, we have a partial answer to, which is looking back at the way we used to live traditionally. I guess that's where I was trying to get to, you know, which is why my mother's memories are something that is really, really important for me, and the way indigenous people and people who are living more in traditional ways today is something that I should look at as well, because it really gives us hints as to the way maybe we should be living in our lives in order to combat all these issues, including, if you go off tangentially and not too far out, climate change. You know, all sorts of political unrest in the world, which will result because of climate change and wars that happen. And how is that related to farming? In every single way it's related to farming, because when you change the farming system and you make it local, then all of a sudden people actually are closer to the land, the people who actually create the food. Farmers in Connecticut especially are very, very cognizant of the quality of food that they create. Our farmers over here do not use pesticides in some sort of haphazard, liberal way. The farmers who raise meat for us over here are very, very cognizant about the way the animals are treated and the chemical inputs as well. So we have a very special situation that's developed, and really over the last 20 decades it's actually started to explode here, because when I was growing up nobody really spoke about this stuff. And when my mom was growing food for our restaurant, you know, over 30 years ago, we didn't call it farm to table. It's just what she did. Right? But the farm to table movement is absolutely incredible. The localism movement is absolutely essential. You know, if you think about seafood, 85% of seafood is imported. Today we send off some of our healthiest, tastiest seafood to other countries. One thing that I work on is invasive species. Well, invasive species are problematic of the habitat, so you want to get rid of them. One that gets tremendous amounts of press is the one that you see on YouTube, the flying carp, you know, that are now in 18 states. A fish that's super high in omega-3 fatty acids, is low on the food chain because it's an herbivore. It grows gigantically. We sell it for top dollar, so the Chinese will buy it, and wealthy people in Chinese are gobbling it up. And meanwhile, we're sending it away because we don't want to eat carp. So what is that kind of an example of? Well, it's an example of the necessity for us to think out of the box, which means, carp is good food, actually. Insects, you know, gross people out, but 3/4 of the world eat insects. If you want to talk about the input of insects, to farm a cricket, which is as nutritious as a cow, a gallon and a half of water is all you need to make a pound of crickets. 2,500 gallons of water go into making a pound of steak in a world where fresh water is a diminishing resource. What does that mean? It means that we got to rethink the way we do things. And it also means that you guys are the leaders in this all happening, because you guys are the ones who get it, because you are supporting the small farmer. And the small farmer is so far as it stands right now, an endangered species in the United States, which it wasn't so 100 years ago. I'm just yapping on. If you guys have anything to say, that'd be awesome. Yes, Yvette. Yes.
I have a question about your program in New Haven.
Yeah.
With the underprivileged or the poor.
Yeah.
I was reading about it online.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, how do you speak to that population
Mm-hmm.
who lives in a food desert for the
Yeah.
most part? How do they access quality local food and organic food?
Yeah, at that point, it's not about local, and it's not necessarily about organic at the same time, too. So, unfortunately, as it stands right now, local and organic, generally speaking, is something that is only available to people who can really afford it. So, when you're dealing with, though, I mean, there are exceptions, you know, like Wholesome Wave worked on a really successful program and made it happen in the Farm Bill, where you get $2 for every $1 food stamp at farmers markets, right? So, but overall, man, if you're going to be, if you're in any inner city in Connecticut or anywhere else, you're not going to have an option for organic. You know, if you're in Salinas Valley, where they're all migrant workers and there's organic farms, you're not going to have organic even with organic farms around, because organics cost more, and the average person who can't afford it won't buy it. So what do? You have to make sure that people understand the basics of nutrition, which is that meat is not the center of the plate. Meat is something you treat yourself to. If you're going to eat meat, eat the highest quality meat that you can possibly get. Pay 3 times, 4 times as much. Eat a nugget of it and really savor it. It's the same thing with dairy. You know, anything that's dairy, your cheese, your creams, your milks, your butter, just get the best, right? Organic. And then the rest of your plate should be plants. And the only plants that you really need to definitely get organically, if you can, would be like greens. You know, for me at our restaurant, we're not an organic restaurant. We use, and we would love to be completely organic, but we also want to be affordable to people as well. So we use the environmental working group's dirty dozen list. So the dirtiest dozen always gets organic at Mia's, but if it's garlic, if it's onions, sweet potato, asparagus, broccoli, that generally doesn't get sprayed or gets sprayed very, very little, then we're going to take that small risk.
Do you find that the population there is taken to the message?
Absolutely. You know, because in the end, everyone wants to take care of their families. The problem is this. Today, since we're so... you're late. Yeah, go get yourself a minute. Yeah. No, thank you for coming. So, you know, all of us come from all over the place, right? So, and many of us, most of us have gone on diets before. All of us are really cognizant of our weight. Problem is, none of us know how we're supposed to be eating. We're supposed to be paleo. Well, paleo makes plenty of sense because you cut out all the carbs and the processed food. You're going to drop weight quickly. Oh, but wait a second. There's a direct link between the consumption of red meat and prostate cancer and colorectal cancer and other cancers at the same time too. And oh man, I shouldn't be having that much saturated fat. Oh, you know, maybe, I just read Dean Ornish's book, The Spectrum. I'll go vegan. That's what I'll do. But the reality is there's a zillion different ways of eating and eating right. You look at the Blue Zone studies, everyone eats differently. There's not a single vegan on there. There's one group that doesn't drink alcohol. you know, Seventh-day Adventists, but they eat eggs and cheese, which you would think isn't really great for you, you know, because of the saturated fats or whatever. But these are the people who live the longest. The biggest problem that we have in navigating this territory of eating well today is that none of us are steeped in our traditional ways of eating because we're all from everywhere else. That's why people from other countries who are healthy come to America and are completely confused. Japanese people come to America, end up getting breast cancer where breast cancer doesn't exist, you know. Filipinos come here and get high blood pressure where, you know, back home it's not that way. You know what it looks like in Polynesia. You know what is going on with the Native American populations, the African American population, you know, because people aren't eating the way they were eating centuries ago. So I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Yes.
I have a question. With your interaction between farmers, especially small farms,
Yeah.
do you get the feeling that there's a really strong awareness about the importance of the honeybee as a pollinator?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But there's also a lot of evolution going on over there too. Our honeybee that is experiencing the die-offs are also an invasive species from Europe. And the Africanized killer bees that we hear about all the time that we're so worried about are actually better pollinators. They're harder workers. They get up earlier in the morning and they keep on pollinating all the way late into the evening. And they occasionally kill people. Yeah. But apparently there are a lot of people who are producing honey are using killer bees now. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so many people now are aware that the population of the honeybee has plummeted.
Yeah.
They know about the CCD, colony collapse disorder, and a lot of farmers that I've talked to are really being very careful about the use of pesticides.
Yeah. And we're not sure exactly why, though, why it's happening, but pesticides would be, you know, definitely a good suspect there, right?
Yeah, and the varroa mite.
Yeah. Thank you.
Honeybees are really susceptible to a couple of different pesticides, but one of the more typical ones, which is 7-carbaryl. They're more susceptible than any of the pests that you're trying to spray. And typically early season, you're spraying in order to control a small population so that you don't have multiple generations spreading itself through the year. So carbaryl is one of the cheapest and one of the most broad